Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Construction Online workshop. Stay on track with Construction Online Scheduling. I'm Holly Gipson, a Senior Product Specialist here at UDA Technologies, and I'm joined by my colleague Jordan Davis, also a Senior Product Specialist, and for many of you guys, a trainer here at UDA.
Hey everyone, good afternoon.
And thanks so much for joining us today. We're excited to walk you guys through Construction Online Scheduling. Today we're going to be covering some best practices for your scheduling from start to finish. We'll look at ways to streamline the process of creating your schedules, show you some tips and tricks that you may not already know. We'll look at the best way to share your schedules with other people, both on your internal and external teams. And we'll also spend some time looking at how to keep your schedules up to date. Really some tricks for keeping those schedules updated, making sure that you and your team are always on the same page when it comes to those project schedules. So we're excited to walk you through that today. And again, thank you for joining us. So with that, let's dive in. Jordan, I know you and I were just talking about so many of the clients that you've worked with recently to help get started with Construction Online. You have that great perspective of working with so many of our customers out there as they're getting started. Can you maybe talk a little bit about scheduling and the importance that we see there? I know it's a really popular thing that people want to do when they're first getting started.
Yeah, absolutely, Holly. So most clients that I work with at some point or another will find their way over to the scheduling tool inside of Construction Online. And that's just because to run an effective construction project, you have to keep track of your project timelines. Now, I'll say I've worked with clients who keep up with their schedules on a whiteboard. Not very recommended, but you have to do what you can to get by, I suppose. I've heard stories of people who are trying to keep up with their projects from a host of sticky notes scattered throughout the office, people who have used calendar systems in the past. And these all are trying to address a serious challenge in the construction industry, which is keeping track of tons of information about when something should be finished or when you expect people to show up on a job site. But what we found when we look at other tools out there is that it's really hard to keep all of this information, one, stored, and two, easily accessible. And we think that Construction Online's Gantt chart system is the best tool to keep track of your construction schedules because it does a lot of remembering for you. It also does a lot of work, a lot of heavy lifting to keep people in the loop. So we're going to be talking today about how to set up schedules, how to build them out efficiently and effectively. But a huge portion of what you're going to be getting out of Construction Online schedules is the schedules are going to remember a lot of these important dates for you. And it's going to remind you when something important is coming up. So we're pretty excited to talk about the reminder system inside of Construction Online today, the notification system that we built in, and some updates that we've brought to the table as well. And Holly, I'll tell you, our clients who have used any type of Gantt chart scheduling system in the past, like Microsoft Project and a few others, are really going to feel right at home. And they do feel right at home because the tool is just really easy to get started with.
Yeah, that's right. You'll have all the advantages of, that familiarity with the Gantt chart system if you've used one before. Like you said, if you've never used one, then, this will be a great introduction to it because one thing that sets construction, one thing that sets Construction Online Scheduling apart is that it is so fast, so easy to use. It's actually the world's fastest web-based scheduling tool. It's something that we've speed tested against really every other web-based scheduling platform out there to make sure that the experience that you have is fast, smooth, easy to use. For those of you who are new to Construction Online, we are serving at this point over 650,000 construction professionals all over the world, which means that we need to make sure that these tools are really outstanding, fast, easy, and that's exactly what you get with Construction Online Scheduling. So with that, let's go ahead and dive in. We'll start by looking at some of the best ways there to create your schedule.
Yeah, so go ahead.
Well, you have so many options. I think, Jordan, you and I are probably thinking the same thing here. So when you, jump into your Construction Online account, just to take a couple of steps back, normally you're going to start out here at your company overview. And one of the things that I really love in your company overview section here is going to be your company calendar. This is where you start to see schedules. Some of the payoff from creating those schedules is going to be being able to see them all together side by side. I know so many of you guys are managing, not just one or two projects, but 10 or 20. We really want to be able to look at what's going on at our company from a big picture perspective. So the company calendar is going to bring together information from all of your projects, including things that you'll add to your Gantt chart schedules, which is what we'll be focusing on building up today. But it's great for you guys to be able to see that when you're looking at this company calendar, you've got all that information right here in one place. So when you start to look at the benefits of creating your schedule and really investing a little bit of time into putting that together at the beginning of your project, this is really part of it, because now we can see everything. That's going to be accessible to everyone, and there's nothing special that you have to do. Your Gantt charts are going to automatically populate onto your project and company calendar, so you've got that information at hand. Now, of course, to create this, we would, head over to one of our projects, and, we usually recommend using a template. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment, but there are actually several ways that you can create a new schedule when you're looking at doing that in Construction Online. So we'll go to our project, select calendars and schedules, and now head right into our scheduling tab. And you guys can see that here, for this particular project, I haven't created a schedule yet, so we're going to look at some options for how you would actually go ahead and do that.
Yeah, one of the first and most obvious ways would be to create a blank schedule. We'll get to that one in a moment. Holly had mentioned that one of our absolute best practices that we recommend is setting up and using a schedule template, especially for projects that are similar in type to each other. You can see here on the left, we're actually tracking our projects by type. We're looking at a commercial project here. So ideally, we would have built out a commercial project schedule template that we could pull directly into the project. Now, I'm asked this question quite often. Where do the schedule templates come from inside of Construction Online? Because most accounts, when they get started, well, there's not any schedule templates. Well, the schedule templates come from you and from your work. What we found is that while every project might be a little different, and I can already feel someone out there recoiling a bit when I say, oh yeah, just build a schedule template. Oh, my schedules are all completely unique. What we found is that that's not entirely true. There's an art and a science to building a successful construction project, and it really does center around repeatable practices and processes. So we really do recommend building out a template from one of your successful schedules, one that has just run very well from start to finish. It's not going to be perfect, right? It's not going to move through without any updates or changes, but you can really get a lot of value and a lot of efficiency out of turning one of your schedules into a template. Now, we also have the option to import a schedule from Microsoft Project. Now, this is a really, really useful option if you are using Microsoft Project, or if you've worked with someone who's using Microsoft Project who could send over a copy of the schedule. It's really, really easy to import. You would just select the project file here. Do note it's an XML file. If you have a question about that, I can help you import. It's pretty straightforward. But all you would need to do is pick the file and import it in. Now, in the cases where you don't have either of these options, we'd recommend starting with a blank schedule. It's really, really easy to get started.
Yeah, that's right. So just to be able to show you guys really how easy it is to build out a project, if you don't have one that you can pull in, and often when we're looking at templates and we're looking at pulling in maybe from a Microsoft project, what you're really doing is just giving yourself such a great head start. You're going to speed up this process. A lot of times, though, it's nice to know how to work with the task and tools within the schedule itself, and there's so much that you can actually customize. We have a great question coming in from a Microsoft project user right now who's really looking for a better way to take that schedule information and communicate that out. So we'll look at how that works in a moment. But there is definitely a lot that you can customize. So we did want to walk through the process of just building out your schedule and really some best practices there. Now, just to kind of show you around Construction Online Scheduling, you'll notice that you have Your schedule here, we haven't added anything to it yet, so we'll start to build that out in a moment. One thing that you'll also start to see populate as you begin adding to your schedule is your dashboard here, which is just going to show that big picture project timeline. You'll be able to see start date, end date, and kind of where you're landing there. So it's a great thing to keep your eye on, especially as the project is progressing. For now, I'm actually going to go into full screen mode. So when you're working with a schedule, very often we want to take advantage of as much real estate as we can. So you have this great full screen option. And you'll notice now that we're here, we can start to move this around a little bit if we want to see, maybe more of our list or more of our Gantt. You have some different views that you can work with. So we'll add a little bit of information and start to show you guys that. And you can also, of course, customize what shows in your column set here. So if, you find that you're really, as you build out your schedule, that it's really handy to have, a view of how many calendar days are going to elapse, front and center for whatever reason, you can really turn these on and off to suit how you like to build out your schedules.
Yeah, I think one of the adjustments I recommend when people are getting started is to turn off the checkbox column over on the far left. That's for marking a task complete. It's a little difficult to accidentally click on the checkbox, but just to make sure that you're not working through and have to check it off and then uncheck it again, it's pretty easy to hide that column. I think it's a really good demonstration of how you can customize the interface for yourself, and it also prevents you from slipping and checking something off that shouldn't be complete.
Just don't forget to turn it back on when it's time to start updating. Now, one more thing before we start adding some tasks to our schedule here is you do have some options. And some of these, even if you guys are longtime Construction Online users, are new tools that we've added just really to make the process of building and working with your schedules a little bit easier. And I recommend checking those as well, just to make sure that you've got your options set the way that you want. You'll be able to do things like have the Gantt chart display the task names and dates right on the Gantt chart. I know a lot of people really like to hide the list a little bit once you have your schedule built, so that's a great viewing tool. And what I'd really like to draw your attention to now is your automatic predecessor option, which I'm going to leave turned on. And what this does is it just automatically establishes those predecessor relationships in sequence as we're adding tasks. So that's one less thing that you have to do. Again, you can always go back and adjust those predecessors, but it's nice to have those relationships building as you're going through and building your schedule.
Now, predecessors are where the scheduling system in Construction Online and just really Gantt chart systems in general stand out from something like using, say a calendar program to actually build out your schedules. Now, for those of you who aren't too familiar with a predecessor, this is a relationship that's established between two or more tasks inside of a schedule that tells the scheduling system how the task should be handled as you move forward in time. So as we'll see in a moment, Holly's going to add in a schedule group, which is going to collect the tasks together. Then she's going to add more than one scheduled task. So these are two items that you would need to complete for your project to actually move forward. And what our system is doing right now with the automatic predecessors is establishing a relationship between task number 2 and 3, so between design services and permits. Now what's actually happening here, you can see the predecessor line showing up on the Gantt chart. If we were to say, move design services ahead one day, let's say that we didn't complete this on Wednesday, and instead, we were out sick, or whoever typically handles this sort of task in the office, maybe you didn't actually get the plans back in on time, so you couldn't submit and actually start the process of applying for permits. Well, you could see the schedule automatically moved the permits task one day ahead in time. So with a very simple connection point, you can really make your schedule work and update a lot of different information for you very quickly. Anytime that a scheduled task is delayed or needs to be updated in terms of the duration, you can leverage the predecessors to actually build and update your schedule for you instead of having to go through and update the start and the end dates for every single task after a certain point. This is the fatal flaw in using something like a calendaring system, which does not let you establish relationships between calendar event A and calendar event B. Now, we probably won't get too in depth in terms of discussing the predecessor relationships today. Do keep in mind, though, that there are a few different ways you can connect tasks. For instance, we're looking at a finish-start relationship, which basically reads, well, when this previous task is finished, start this task. You can also set up things like, well, these two tasks always start on the same day. Makes a lot of sense for something like a delivery task that would then key into an actual construction task.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly right. So as you kind of go through, you'll notice, well, one thing is, I hope you guys have noticed how quick it was for me to already begin building that schedule. So we definitely, again, can't stress enough how much I recommend using templates to speed this process up. But when you're looking at maybe building your first schedule, or you need to build a new one for a different type of job, it really is fast and easy to get this information in and build that schedule out. Now let's kind of look at the anatomy maybe of what I've done so far. So I've used my toolbar. So one thing you'll notice with Construction Online is you have this handy toolbar that you can kind of move around. It stays with you. I love using it to create things like new groups or indent things in and out. So there's a lot that you can do here. I've used the toolbar to insert a couple of groups. Now a common question that I get is, do we have to use groups, or, your schedule looks so organized, does mine have to look that way? And really, the answer I always give is, if that's helpful to you, then I definitely recommend it. One of the advantages to groups is that you can kind of collapse things as you move past that phase, get it out of your way a little bit. It just keeps things a little bit more organized. But if you prefer more of a flat list, again, completely up to you. It's so easy to come in and organize this information. So I've got a couple of groups. Now our groups are always going to display a start and end date based on the tasks that are contained within them. And for each of these tasks, you can see that I've got start dates, end dates, number of work days, and then that predecessor relationship. Again, if we want to adjust our columns to show different information here on the list, we can do that. Now with the predecessors, because I do have that sequential automatic predecessor turned on, it has automatically built those in. And as I'm going through, though, I may need to start adjusting some things. So we may not expect, site work to, take too long. So we're kind of setting up some things that maybe don't necessarily align with the predecessor relationship that we've set. I want to make some adjustments here to this task. So I'd be able to just, kind of grab this, extend it out. Maybe I expect that to take through the end of the week. We'll come back and say that maybe we do want this one to go with that line, but maybe we also want this one as well to be a kind of predecessor for our site work here, our line number 5. And so you can see that if you want to do those manually or make some adjustments, all you have to do to establish that predecessor relationship is just type in the line number of the task that this one is dependent on. So in this case, I want to say that my lines 6 and 7 are both dependent on line number 5, site work being completed. So I've got those relationships set up that way. So again, super quick and easy to do. Now, as we look at working with each of these tasks, so you can see I've kind of started to build out the beginning of my project. We're going to be working on our foundation here. We may want to add some additional details to these tasks. So you can open up the details just by double clicking, and you'll notice that you do get an area that allows us to really start to adjust some of that additional information. Of course, you can adjust a start and end date here, so if we wanted to make those adjustments, but some of the things that you can do with these additional details would be things like set a priority for these tasks. Maybe we want to say that this one is a high priority item. For update purposes, you can set a status, so we'll circle back around to this one, as well as your % complete. You can also track things like the type of task that this is, so if we wanted to maybe tag these as perhaps construction task as opposed to maybe planning would be pre-construction, we could select that. And one of the great things about Construction Online is that most of these drop downs are completely customizable by you. So I don't see the option I'm looking for. I can add that in really, really easily here. Save that, and now I've got that Oh, I think I added it to the wrong place, but now I've got those options there. You also have the option to tag a trade, so you can build out a list of trades, as well as assign things like cost codes. Looks like we don't have that turned on for this project, so we'll go ahead and turn that on and save. And we can come back and assign cost codes to those scheduled tasks if we needed to. So those options give you just additional ways that you would be able to not only track those tasks when you're setting up, but also do things like, report on them later, or, communicate with an accounting team how this should be coded. So a lot of great things that you can do with that information there. Of course, you can also add descriptions to these tasks. So if you needed to put a little bit more information in as far as what's going on with this task, add notes for your field team, and of course do things like assign resources and reminders. So this step is really what's going to start to allow us to better communicate this information out to others on our team. When we assign the resources as well as set up reminders, that really dials us into so much more now that we can do with that schedule as well.
Yeah, so earlier, as Holly had mentioned, one of our webinar attendees was asking, is there a way to take the schedule and actually communicate that out to vendors or subcontractors or suppliers? And the short answer is yes. And the longer answer is, which way do you want to do that? Because there are plenty of ways to communicate this information out. In addition to setting a subcontractor into the schedule, or a vendor or a supplier, not only can you set up reminders for things like when the schedule is going to start, or at least the portion of the schedule that they're working on, you can also use all sorts of automated tools built into the platform. We'll touch on things like company game plans and notifications momentarily. Something else to keep in mind, though, is that when you assign a resource to a schedule, if you've also added that resource to the project team as a team link contact, they can actually log in and look at a digital version of the schedule themselves, which in my experience, and in the experience of many clients that I've worked with, is really the best way to share a schedule. You could print out the schedule, you could send out a reminder here or there. There's really nothing else like being able to look at the schedule on your own computer or tablet, or however you're accessing the schedule, to actually see when you're going to be on site, or if you have any questions about when something is starting. There's a lot to be said for giving people access to a schedule through Construction Online, and it couldn't be simpler than adding them into the project and then having them log in for the first time. If you want to see what your subcontractors or suppliers are seeing inside of the schedule, we have a really easy way to preview what they can see by previewing their portal for the project. This is, again, probably the best way to share schedules inside of Construction Online, simply because once you've shown someone how to see their schedule once, they probably won't take any other route to get to it. It beats paper 100% of the time, because if you do print out a schedule, from that point the schedule is virtually worthless. It's dead. It can't be updated. But our scheduling system through Construction Online is always going to be updated. So when we move into strategies and best practices for keeping your schedules up to date, the second component to that is keeping your people up to date. And using the portals is really the best recommended practice that we would tell you to do.
That's right. So when you look at ways of sharing and doing that through the portals, you've got a couple of options. One would be, of course, the Team Link portal for your trades and subcontractors, suppliers, really third-party partners on your project. You also are able to, of course, do the same thing with your clients. Now, part of it is making sure, of course, that they're assigned. So here I've assigned my framer, Ted, to the Team Link portal. We do want to double check if you ever wonder, well, how can we make sure they have the correct permissions? You can always just go into your Client Link and Team Link settings here. Double check your scheduling section, and so this will allow us to look at what they can see on the calendar or schedule. So for our subcontractors, for example, our trade partners, we're able to share with them the schedule, and we can also show we could maybe not show the Gantt chart, but just show it more on a schedule view. So you've got some options there. You can also allow them to see the full calendar or schedule or only things that they're assigned to. So again, you've got some control there as far as what they would see. And then of course, your clients or external partners would be able to just simply log into their portal. And when they log in, they're going to be able to see the calendar or schedule as well. And like Jordan mentioned, you're always able to see how that's going to show up for him. So I can see that my trade partner Ted here is going to be able to see everything on the schedule. That's what I've given him access to. We can control that a little bit, and that's such a great way to share. Now, of course, one thing, if you're choosing options like to only share assigned tasks, then again, make sure that we are assigning those out on the task level when you're building your schedule, because that's what's going to kind of make sure. So we'll go ahead and add some additional tasks maybe for our framer Ted, and then look at some additional ways that we might share that information with him. So here I think I'm going to do a new group. Ted is my framer, so we'll come back to our trusty toolbar. We'll insert a group, and looks like we want to push that out just a little bit. We'll call this framing, and then we'll add, a couple of additional tasks here. So we'll say framing materials, framing labor. Now, a couple of the things that this allows you to do when you're looking at maybe putting materials on here. So normally when we see that on a schedule, that's usually going to reference the delivery. So we would often tag this with the date that we're expecting those materials to arrive on site, and confirming that that's been done is as simple as just checking that off. Those labor items are usually going to be multi-days, so we'll say that we expect framing to take, about a week or so. That predecessor relationship, again, already established. And for my framing labor, I want to make sure that my framer here, Ted, is assigned. So we'll go ahead and just assign him to this task. So now, of course, when we're looking at his portal, not only is that going to show on the calendar for him, but any reminders that we set up here are also going to go to him as well. So when we look at sharing that schedule information through those individual reminders, it's a great way to just reach out and really ping those assigned resources, kind of give them a nudge. Many people that you work with are going to log into that portal religiously once they realize, especially how easy it is and how all that information is just, again, together in one place. But we know not everyone does that all the time, or maybe just has access to their phone instead of a computer. So maybe they're wanting to double check the mobile app, or just get a text reminding them that something needs to happen. We're all so busy, and I think that probably goes for all of you guys and your partners as well. So when we look at these reminders, one thing that's really cool about Construction Online is that you can set up as many of these, as you like. So often we'll do a planning reminder that's going to go out 7 to 10 days ahead of time. So we want to give them a little bit longer kind of lead time on that. You can even choose the time of day here. So I want it to go maybe in the afternoon. Maybe I think that's when will grab some attention there. And you can even type in a custom message. So if you want to have certain phrasing that you like to use here, or just even want to add a personal message to that, those resources on the task, you can do that here. You also have the ability to do like starting reminders, which might actually come in, say, 2 days before the task. And then you might do another one day before. So you can really do, anything that makes sense for you, your team, and your extended team and your workflow. You can go ahead and set those up here.
Yeah, and if you are really concerned that someone's going to forget to show up that day, you can set the calendar date to 0 days before, which will send it on the day of. It's a little trick that some people don't know about, but could potentially be helpful for that person who's really great at their job, but really terrible at remembering what day it is.
I know, and that happens all the time, right? I think people who are really great at their jobs are usually the busiest people out there. I think that's what you see. So those reminders are super helpful. Now, of course, when you have a lot of schedules going or a lot of tasks happening, you may end up with a lot of reminders going out. And one thing that we've actually built in Construction Online as well is a way to really take all the information from not just this schedule, but other schedules that you've built, other things that you've assigned, and pull it together in a report that we can email out to people. So when we look at sharing information, you've got sharing through the portals, giving them access there. You've got setting up those individual reminders. So that's going to go out for each individual task to those individual resources. But you also have your game plan here, which is going to allow you to, again, send one report or message that's going to contain all those reminders in one place, essentially. So to set up a game plan, we may look at, again, our framer, Ted. And I imagine that Ted, I think he does a great job. So he's probably working on multiple jobs for me. I know many of you guys, partner with the same companies very regularly to, for different tasks or different trades or different things that are happening on your projects. And so let's assume here that Ted does a great job, and he's actually working on 5 jobs for me over the next 2 or 3 months. So I've assigned him to some things, but I want to make sure that he's getting updated on new things that are being assigned to him, what the schedule or game plan is, if you will, and that's exactly what game plan is for. So I may decide that I want Ted as my framer to receive an email every single weekday. I want it to go ahead and send to him pretty early in the morning. Let's say we want it maybe say by about 6 a.m. I want it to go ahead and give him a 7-day look ahead. So we'll choose the next week. And we'll group this by project since he's typically going to be working on projects for me. And I'll include myself on that so I can be CC'd on this game plan here. So then what will happen is every morning, 6 a.m., Ted's going to get an email there, a game plan, that'll essentially say, hey, Ted, here's your game plan for today or for the next 7 days or whatever time frame we've included. It's going to show him tasks assigned to him on the calendars and schedules. It's going to show him other things too, like to-dos, punch list items, or RFIs that he's associated with. And then that way, what will happen is he has that nice, concise report. So he'll still get those individual reminders, but he'll also get a game plan every day. So it's just letting me know that I already had one for Ted. So we'll update his settings there. So now he's going to get that sent out to him every single day. So again, it's just one more way of communicating and sharing what's on the schedules that you're putting together with the rest of the team.
Yeah, and I think this really fills a great gap in the notification or reminder other in that you want to keep people up to date, but I can't tell you how many times I've had a conversation with one of our clients who says, well, what other systems we've used in the past send out 500,000 emails to our subcontractors, and they hate it and they stop paying attention to the things that we're doing. Well, we have the perfect tool for you, and that really is the game plan. The game plan is going to collect all of those individual notifications or reminders that might send out in one easily digestible report that sends out once per day. So it cuts down on that attitude that some people might have because, well, it's impossible for them to feel that way because you have total control over it. We found that the game plan is probably one of the most useful and most used tools inside of Construction Online. If you're not using a game plan, go ahead and set one up for yourself and see how useful the information is. Set it up so that you receive one tomorrow. Take a look at everything that you probably haven't checked off on your own to-do list, and you'll see very quickly how useful this feature could be for you and for people in your company. Holly, I know at one point you went to an off-site training session and found that the company you were working with actually was using a game plan to run their weekly kickoff meetings or to keep track of everything that's happening in the company. Yeah,
that's right. It's such a great report. I mean, in addition to being a great reminder system or a great system just for keeping everyone in the loop, there are a lot of great uses for the game plan, and I have worked with clients who are using it. They would print up their game plans and bring them with them to that weekly meeting just to say, well, okay, let's look at what's on the agenda for the next week, kind of cross-reference those lists, make sure that everybody felt good about that workload and knew what their responsibilities were. So it's a great way to no extra work is required, to compile that information. I think that's one of the things that I see with tools like game plan and some of the other things that you can do with these schedules is that you want to be able to create the schedule easily, but you want to be able to do something with that information. Once you've built it, we don't want to just build it and, like you said, print it one time and never come back to it. We want to be able to continue using that information, and so that's something that game plan really allows you to do well. Now, we've kind of looked at some great ways of sharing that. I know, Jordan, one thing that you were mentioning earlier too that a lot of people don't know is that, with just kind of your regular Construction Online notifications, you're also being alerted to things like, tasks that are being marked as complete or, assigned to individuals. So that's, again, completely automated and one more way that the system is working for you.
Especially if you're an administrator in your company or someone who should be keeping up with your projects from a higher level, there's a lot going on a day-to-day basis that is going to pull your attention away from keeping track of your schedule. Now, what we've built is a notification system that, one, is very flexible and customizable, but two, shows you things that you care about and that you need to keep track of for your daily responsibilities. I'd encourage you all to take a look at your notification settings. If you aren't sure where to find that, take a look in your top right settings menu and you'll be able to find your own notification settings. From here, you can actually set the system to really tell you what's important to you, what's happening inside of the system. One of the new notifications, I guess it's not brand new, but it's newer, is setting a notification to send out when a scheduled task is marked as complete. Now, not only can you receive an email notification for that, but for those of you who are keeping track of schedules in general as one of your primary responsibilities, you can also have a text message sent to your phone, which is incredibly useful so that if something finishes ahead of schedule, or maybe something that you've been keeping an eye on and you really want to know when it's finished is completed, you'll receive a notification from Construction Online within maybe 60 seconds. It's a really useful feature. It can help keep you in the loop, or it can give you a good idea of the pulse of your project to find out where you are. I really would encourage you to turn this setting on.
So I think that's 4 or 5 different communication tools kind of all working in the background to really keep not only that schedule in place, but to keep you and everybody on your team up to date as to what's happening, what they need to do, what's changing, so really, really great scheduling and communication platform here. Now, before we move on, we did have a great question come in just about assigning resources on the schedule and kind of looking at that game plan in terms of, what's the difference between explicit tasks or regular tasks. So when you're looking at the game plan, you have the option to include and we'll jump back to those settings just to give you guys a visual, but you have the option to include schedule tasks, so only tasks explicitly associated or all tasks in the contact schedule. So essentially what this means is, for Ted here, with his game plan, I can choose, I want him to receive scheduled tasks. I can choose to only have the game plan include things that I have marked him as a resource for explicitly. So I've gone into that task, I've gone to my resources tab, and I've typed in Ted's name where he is assigned to that task, and that's what he's going to get on the game plan. A lot of times, though, we know that there's some interconnectedness too between things that are happening on the schedule. So for some people receiving the game plan, because remember this could be, trades or subcontractors or project managers or construction managers or even owners or clients, you can send the game plan to anyone. So there may be certain team members where we don't want them to see only things that are assigned to them, but we want them to see everything on schedules that they're related to. So as a project manager, I might not even really be assigned to any task on the schedule, but I might need to see them all in my game plan. So that's kind of what that option does, is just allow you to control on the game plan. Are we only going to see things that I'm named as the assigned resource for, or do I want to see everything on that schedule? So great question, and great option too, because it does make game plan even more flexible in terms of being able to use it for so many different roles on your project there. Now, if we jump back to our schedule, we've kind of talked about, creating the schedule. I'll say the T word again, templates, because I really, really love that. So let's say that we look at our schedule. I've invested some time to build this out. Maybe I notice that I don't have any milestones here, and I do want to get some of those set up. So we'll just kind of come here to my inspection items. I'll double click on that. And one thing that you'll actually have to in your task details is the ability to kind of mark this as a milestone. And so milestones are always going to be only for one day. They'll show up like this on your schedule, and they'll also populate here on your project timeline. Typically, I see milestones used for things like inspections, and frequently I'll see them used for like payment milestones as well. So that's a couple of great uses for those. And one thing that is kind of cool to note is that with your milestones, you can choose when you're sharing this with clients to only share these milestones. So keep that in mind as you're building out your schedules, that if you plan to share with your clients through the client portal, you could choose to restrict that access to only these milestone events. So let's say that I've built this and I'm really super happy with how my schedule has turned out. I feel like I've got a good plan in place here. So what I want to do next is come in and then save this schedule here as a template. So, when we kind of look at the best ways to again, use this information that we have on our schedules, the different ways that we're able to see it and kind of work with it. You want to be able to repeat that in the future. So when you'll notice that you have some options for your schedule, and one of them is just going to be to save that as a template. You can give it a name. So in this case, maybe this is going to be my master. This could be my master residential schedule, or it could be a schedule that I'm using for a development that I'm working on, or something like that. So again, the naming is completely up to you. You can set that up, however you like. So you can see how easy it is. When you're saving this as a template, you do have some options as to what we include. So maybe we want to not include resources, or maybe we do. Maybe that's part of the template process, is having those same resources assigned. So you've got some options as to what you include there. And now that'll show up as part of your schedule templates that you can use. And moving forward, you'll be able to use those when you're creating schedules.
Yeah, and if you ever need to edit your schedule templates, you can get to them from pretty much any scheduling menu and hop into manage the template contents. Sometimes I'll hear people ask, well, how do we actually update this if for whatever reason we want to pull a resource out of our schedule template because we don't want to use that person anymore. Mm-hmm. It happens. It's pretty simple. You can go in and manage the template contents.
So can't champion templates enough. They're such great ways to really work with and manage those schedules, and it's, again, sets you up for that repeatable process. Now, really, one of the next steps is, though, we've built our schedule, we've given all of our team and extended team members and maybe even our client access to that. We've got some great communication and sharing options set up, and so now really what we want to make sure of is that our schedule is kept up to date. And keeping the schedule regularly updated actually gives you some really, really great benefits. One, maybe the obvious one is, it's keeping you and your team all, on the same page. Everybody knows if things are being adjusted, those updated schedule dates. We know that the schedule is going to change. That's a given for almost every job. So keeping the schedule up to date is a great way of, of course, making sure that everyone's on the same page. Marking tasks off as complete, especially as they're completed. Again, going back to some of those notifications, keeps not only the construction or production team in the loop as far as what's happening, but can be such a great tool for keeping even like maybe an accounting or office team in the loop to know what we need to bill for and things like that. So you really have some outstanding options as far as why you would want to keep the schedule up to date. It also is going to allow you to hopefully use that information as you make adjustments to perhaps have a more accurate schedule next time, or be able to measure, the impact of changes that you're having to make. So one thing that we recommend that everyone do is take a look after you've got your schedule kind of firmly in place. Take a look at this baseline tool. That's going to allow you to, you can actually set as many baselines as you like, but I like to make one in the very beginning. We can just call that starting or whatever you like. So that way I've got something to measure against. And if I have to start making some changes, then I'll be able to see, okay, well, we had to, push, permits were delayed or something like that. So I can start to see, the impact to my actual end date on, on the schedule here as well. So if we start to kind of see some of this get pushed or extended out, you can always do some comparisons, be able to see like, okay, how did this, actually impact my schedule? So of course, right now I haven't really started anything, so you can, kind of always look at these individually if we want to see some of those adjustments there. But it's just a great tool for being able to see, again, the impact of your changes. Now, as far as keeping the schedule up to date go, this is a great view, but one thing I do want to point out is that you do have the list view as well. So this list view can be a great way to keep things up to date. Now, of course, you can mark these tasks off as complete on the mobile app, which we see a lot of people do, especially just for a quick update on a completion or percentage completion. But this view is really great for kind of pulling this up on your tablet or laptop, whether that's in the field or the office, and taking, I always advise like just take 10 minutes at the end of every day to keep that schedule updated.
Yeah, and I recommend that as well. I know that running through and updating schedules might not be everyone's favorite task because, well, it involves coming back and doing extra work maybe at the end of the day after you've been out in the field and it's 90, 100 plus degrees in some places or really, really cold in some other places. But it really does help you and your team keep up to date with what's actually happening on the job site. And really, keeping a schedule up to date in increments is a lot easier to do if you just make it a habit that you take care of at the end of the day. Just like you would expect your team to post something like daily logs and updates from the field, or maybe, you yourself need to be keeping up with your own logs from the field, you really should be keeping the schedule up to date as well. An out-of-date schedule is virtually worthless to anyone involved on the project, because it's not keeping you, one, up to date on what you've completed to that point, but two, it's not helping you plan ahead for the future. And our system makes it very, very, very easy to change not only the start and the end date for a project, but really leveraging the predecessor tools inside of Construction Online makes it easy to keep the entire schedule up to date. And of course, if you get into a situation where the predecessors are stopping you from shifting around the schedule, it's really, really simple to temporarily slice or break the predecessor relationships to then be reestablished later on as well. Now, I actually saw someone was asking, okay, what if our schedule, for instance, is running ahead and we pull a few tasks back? Well, we added in a new tool recently that we think is really fantastic. It's the base tool is not brand new. Inside of our schedule, you could set a task to be marked as ASAP or as soon as possible. What that will do is it will essentially remove any gaps between where the scheduled task is and where it should be. So for instance, if a scheduled task is delayed and then the preceding task is pulled back in time, what you'll see is the task will try and race back to make sure that it's starting as early as it possibly can. Well, we added in a new tool that lets you mark all of the scheduled tasks as ASAP, which will then basically do all of the work of going through, say, 100, 150, 200 tasks and marking them as ASAP for you. Now, do keep in mind that this essentially works as a toggle switch. When you turn on this mark all tasks as ASAP, all of your existing tasks will be marked as ASAP. So, if you do that, keep in mind if you try to delay a task, so if you try and pull it forwards in time, you're going to see, well, it's not going to let you do that. That's not that the schedule isn't working. You told our scheduling system that you want it to start as soon as possible, So it's going to do exactly what you told it to do. Please keep that in mind. I'm pretty sure if you turn this option on, you want that to happen anyways, but do keep that in mind.
Great question though. And, kind of going back to, keeping that updated and, being able to see changes like that, sometimes especially when we're first developing a schedule, there will be times where it's not only schedule delays, it's being able to do things earlier. Sometimes those resources are available earlier, sometimes not. So it's great. Sometimes you want to double check that a little bit more manually. Sometimes when you're first developing a schedule, you may want that to happen on a more automated basis. So fast and easy way to make that adjustment there.
Yeah, and if go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say a couple of other things. When you look at keeping a schedule up to date, usually it's actually really simple. I think that is sometimes a little bit of a challenge to make sure that we're taking the time to keep that updated, but really it's all about the dates at that point. If there's anything that needs to be added in, maybe there's been a change order or something, optional gets added on. Sometimes you may need to add some new things, but usually it's about two things. One, making sure that your next few tasks, kind of maybe look ahead to the next week, make sure these start dates still seem correct based on the tasks that are currently running. Are they steady? Are they kind of running the way we want? Are they headed towards a completion on time? It can be great to use the percentage completion for that, because you can see, especially for longer tasks, if you're expecting 2 weeks and you're 1 week in and you're at a 20% complete, you just want to evaluate whether that's accurate or whether anything maybe coming down the line needs to be updated. And that's it. That's really all the updates require. If you have your reminders and game plans set up, those are smart tools. So of course they're going to automatically adjust based on the date adjustments that you make to your schedule. So it really, could not be easier in terms of keeping that up to date. Now we are coming up to the top of the hour, so we've covered a lot of ground today, I think, in terms of best practices for working with your schedules and how to really use this tool. We've also had some really great questions come in from you guys, so we're going to try to spend our last few minutes together to really circle back around and answer some of those there. Now, one of the questions that we had was really just related to the company calendar and how we can see multiple projects together versus only certain ones. And great question, because again, I really love this master calendar. It's one of my go-to pages. I think I love the color coding. I need everything in one place. I want a place where I can see everything. So a couple of things to note on the company calendar is that, any Gantt chart that you add in is going to automatically show up here. If we wanted to do just a side-by-side of a couple of different jobs, you have this show and hide calendar option. And this is going to give you the ability to turn on and off different projects or custom calendars that you've created. So it's probably a good time to mention that when you're looking at the calendar, that's not only going to be the Gantt charts, but it could be things like meetings. It could be things like due dates that you've assigned to change orders or tasks or punch list items, or you name it. If it has a date associated with it, you can see that deadline on your calendar. And you can also create custom calendars for your company. A lot of people will do this for company meetings or holiday time or vacation or things like that. So you've got some great calendar options here, and you can, just choose to turn these on and off. We can either do all at once, or you can, turn them all off and maybe only do a comparison between, maybe this one and, let's see, we'll do this one. I think we've got some good tasks going there. So if I do that and save, you'll notice that a lot of things disappear, and now I've only got 2 schedules that I'm comparing. So, it's super easy to be able to turn that on and off and be able to see exactly what you want. Also worth noting, I think, kind of as a bonus answer to this question, is that with the company calendar and all of your other calendars, you do have the ability to see things like a day-to-day view. So if we just want to see one day at a time, or if we want to see like just this week. I think a lot of people depend on a weekly view, so you've got some really great options for that. There's also a list view, which is, again, just if you prefer more of a list-based layout, this can be, a great way to look at that schedule. And then, of course, the year view, which is going to put that into a heat map for us so we can see where we really have more versus less scheduled. So a lot of great things that you can do with that company calendar, and definitely customize, what you're seeing there as well. Great question.
Yeah, and do keep in mind the calendar view here is your calendar view. So you can set up your company calendar, to show the projects that you care about the most, or the ones that you absolutely have to focus on, while trusting that your team will take care of the other projects. So a little more applicable to those who might have access to a few different project schedules, but really only need to focus on a few. Another question that I saw come in was something about if you have a few scheduled tasks on the calendar and you're not too familiar yet with the different color coding because you haven't customized this yet, if you click on the task, it actually will show you a little bit of information about the task, what schedule it's coming from, and you can jump to view that schedule directly from this menu as well. It's a great shortcut.
Yeah, it is. There's so much to love on this company calendar. I could probably spend the rest of our time together talking about that. But let's see, we've got some other great questions. So we have an interesting question, and a really great one, because I know a lot of you guys will run into this, that just kind of looking at kind of a project that has multiple phases or multiple units. So, what's the best way to take a project that may have 8 or 10 different units, and you're not going to be doing the work to each unit at the same time. So really, what's the best way to schedule for that? And you've got two options. One is to have a project template that you're using, where you would just create a new project for each unit, but using the template system, you only build it once, and then that way when you're ready to do the next unit, you've got the steps outlined as far as what needs to be done, but one isn't necessarily dependent on the other. If there are dependencies kind of within each of those units, so maybe you have your crew or your resources who are going to need to finish unit A and then move on to the next one, and you don't really have external forces driving that, then of course you could always use the groups in a schedule to achieve those phases. So, in that case, your project would be sort of that master, in this case, I think it's maybe a condo building. So your project would be the entire building, and then you would have a group within your schedule for each of those units, which would be a really easy way to get that going. And so kind of just as a reminder on that, you would just, in that case, instead of having planning foundation, you would just have a group that said, unit A, and then, maybe you could have some subgroups underneath that, so it's again, you can have as much structure as you need, but that would be an easy way to set that up as well.
Yeah, and I think that the answer to the question in this case really depends on the scale and also the preference of your company. I mean, there's a number of different ways you can slice a sandwich. There's a number of different ways you can slice a project up into phases. Clients I've worked with in the past will use groups if maybe the tasks themselves are sitting in a range of maybe 15 to 20 tasks for the group. If it starts to stretch a little longer than that, you might want to consider, because of the scale, splitting the project into multiple projects themselves. You could even group those projects together using a project task. Just like we've created a commercial project task, you could set up something like so-and-so condominiums project task or project type that has the different project phases built out as their own projects within that type. It's really easy to find the information that way. The advantage there is you can color code each phase with its own project color, which would then carry across and look very nice on the company calendar. So a couple of different options there. If you want to talk more about setting up multiple projects or talking about setting up multiple groups inside of a schedule, we'd love to have that conversation with you. You can always reach out to us via phone or email and we can talk about the different options there as well.
We also have a great question coming in. I think we've got time to maybe address one or two more here. We have a great question about using the baselines, or kind of different ways of viewing the baselines. So of course you have this this dashboard at the top. So this is your baseline dashboard, and we're able to see choose a baseline. In this case, the schedule only has one. And we want to look at the entire schedule, so I can see that overall I'm 9 work days behind where I thought I would be. And what this is going to display for us is my, projected start and end dates as of the time I took this baseline, and then my current start and end dates as of, where we are right now. What does that look like? If you want to see this, for maybe certain sections, you can come in and choose a section and look at that, so you can see that kind of adjust dynamically. So if we want to see that, and that's another kind of great use for those groups, is that you'll notice that that's what you're seeing here. Now, if you want to see that on an individual line basis, maybe we really want to drill in and see, okay, was it a material delivery or labor? What was causing the delay? You can drill in even further and see on a really granular basis, okay, for this one task here, framing labor, this is where we thought we were going to start and end. Here's kind of where we've ended up. So there's a lot of great ways to kind of view that information within this chart. Now, that does not update on your Gantt chart here. What you're seeing down below is always going to be a live current view of the schedule. One thing about such a collaborative web-based scheduling tool like Construction Online is that it is always going to be up to date. Any change you make is instant. You're not really going back to view other things. If you'd like to do a comparison for your baseline that includes many tasks at once, that's a great use of your reporting area as well. Scheduling has a lot of reports that you can pull from, and one of them is a baseline report. So when you pull this is going to be able to not only show you those groups or a task at a time, but really list out all the tasks, their original start and end date, so that you can really see how far behind each one is on a task by task basis.
Yeah, and I think that the baseline report is really useful when you're looking at the results of a project. When you're trying to find out, okay, so if we run this project or a project like this in the future, where were our stumbling blocks for this project, and was there anything that we can do to influence the schedule? I actually saw a question come through earlier that was asking about using a custom holiday to track a delay inside of the schedule. That's one option. Something that you could do is you could add in a new scheduled task, which is maybe inserted between 2 tasks that kind of serve as predecessors at that point, to push the schedule out. And you could title that rain delay or equipment delivery delay, whatever the delay reason is. You could actually put that into the schedule, which is then very obvious when you run a baseline report to see what actually pushed the schedule out, because you'll see on the variance report, well, there wasn't this task before, and now a task is here that was for 6 days, and it was a, let's say, knock on wood, because we're in hurricane season, but a hurricane comes through and potentially delays your project by up to a week because of the preparation beforehand, the amount of time afterwards, and, not saying, and really hoping we're not speaking this into happening, but having a hurricane come through and delay the work on site, hopefully not causing any damage. You could actually track that and show in this report, well, this really was outside of our control, versus, well, we were 2 days behind on our framing work. Why did that happen? I don't know. Maybe they were just slow. It gives you a lot of information that you can sort through and start to analyze and account for on future projects. I think that's really important, is you want to account for changes in your existing schedules to inform your future schedules. And if you haven't taken a look through your previous schedules before, at least from that type of analytical perspective, you should. You should start today.
Well, that's such another great use of those reports. So when you look at pulling things like your baseline report, or all sorts of other things that you can do here, you can pull reports for milestones, or notes maybe that have been entered or different, kind of completion areas. So there's a lot of different ways that you can, of course, use the reports, but that baseline report in particular is not only a great way of viewing that, but when you're getting ready to build another schedule, it can be helpful to pull those from some of the recent projects that you've done to get an idea if you need to go ahead and make any adjustments to your template. Okay, guys, so I think with that, we are out of time. But as always, we do thank you so much for choosing to spend your lunch hour with us. We hope this has been informative and useful, and we hope you'll all go out and do more with your schedules or start building those schedules today.
Yeah, thank you all so much for joining us during your lunch hours, or maybe for some of you it is absolutely not lunch at all. Seriously though, we really appreciate your time. If there's anything that you have questions about following this webinar, please feel free to give us a call. Our US number is 800-700-8321. You can also find other ways to contact us if you're outside the United States or North America. We have plenty of ways to get in touch. You can always send an email to us as well at info@uda1.com. We would love to have follow-up conversations with you about your schedules. We'd also love to know if you're doing something interesting with your schedules that you think that our other clients would appreciate or learn from as well. Seriously, we would love to know how you're using Construction Online. For those of you who aren't using Construction Online yet, we'd love to talk with you about that as well. Let us know if you saw something interesting. Otherwise, thank you all so much, and we hope you have a great rest of your week.
That's right. Finally, one more quick thing before everyone departs. Just want to draw your attention to our webinar schedule for next week. Definitely take a look at our events page. That's udatechnologies.com/events. There you'll find all of the recordings from previous webinar sessions. You'll find our upcoming schedule of events, including something that I'm really excited to be able to share with all of you next week, which will be the first look at our brand new time tracking tool. So definitely you'll want to mark your calendars for that and join us to take a look.
Seriously, sign up for that one. There have been too many people asking about our time tracking updates that are coming down the pipeline for you not to register for this one. You're going to love it. It's fantastic.
It's a great tool. So we hope to see you guys there next week. Until next time, hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and thanks again for joining us.